Hello everyone, this is the Sword of Damocles, Cicero Part 2. When last we spoke, we were in the midst of this story of the tyrant Dionysius and his friend Damocles. Damocles, if you remember, was saying to the tyrant Dionysius that you have it all, you're so rich, you're so powerful, you must be so happy. And Dionysius had said to Damocles, if you really think I'm that happy, why don't you try and experience, taste I think was the word, degustare, wasn't it? Why don't you taste some of my life? And Damocles had been sat down in this sort of situation that was filled with splendor and extravagance with this gorgeous meal, and he was loving every minute of it. This is taken from the Tusculan dialogues. So this is Cicero now talking about his philosophical notion that in order to be happy, you must first of all be a good person, that if you are a bad person, it is impossible to be happy because there will always be some sort of threat looming over you, perhaps because you've sinned in the past. Or in the same way that if you are an angry person, then anger prevents you from being happy, or greed can prevent you from being happy. So actually you want to free yourself from those sorts of negative emotions, which I suppose you can do with the good old-fashioned Roman discipline. Here's the story, print it off, do whatever you want to do, and let's go through it sentence by sentence. Aderant unguenta coronae incendebantur odores, mensae conquisitissimis epulis extruebantur, fortunatus sibi Damocles videbatur. Aderant. Remember that verb adsum, I am present. Adest, he or it or she is present. Aderat, therefore, it was present. There were perfumes present. That doesn't sound particularly good, but there were perfumes. There were perfumes. Coronae, garlands. Odores incendebantur, third person plural imperfect passive. Excuse me. Incense was being burnt. Mensae. The tables were extruebantur, were being laden, again third person plural imperfect passive, with conquisitissimis superlative, with the most exquisite, I've said, epulis, feasts, dishes. The tables were being laden with the most delicious feasts, with the most delicious dishes. Fortunatus sibi Damocles videbatur. Remember, please, video, active I see, videor, deponent verb I seem. So it's literally Damocles seemed to himself fortunate. I think it's actually Damocles thought of himself fortunate, thought himself lucky. In hoc medio apparatu fulgentem gladium e lacunari saita equina aptum demiti jusit, ut impenderet ilios beati cervicibus. Very Game of Thronesy here. In the middle of this scene, in hoc medio apparatu, in the middle of this splendor, jusit, he ordered, look for your subject. Remember, any unseen, you must first of all, in a sentence, figure out your subject, and you do that by finding the main verb. In this case, jusit. It's third person singular, so look for a nominative singular. There is no nominative singular here, so we've got to put it in. He ordered, jusit, gladium, a sword. Where am I? Demiti. He ordered for a sword, first of all, aptum, joined with a saita equina, with a horsehair, equina, obviously equine, to do with horses, joined with a horsehair, saita, their hair, to demiti, to be hung down from the lacunari, from the ceiling, from the panel ceiling. He ordered a sword, present passive infinitive, to be lowered down from the ceiling, a sword that was aptum, that was joined to a horsehair. Ut, in order that it might, he ordered it to, to dangle, ut impenderet, to dangle over the cervicibus, over the neck of Ilios Beati. I suppose there's some irony here, over the neck of that fortunate man. Again, two of you have asked, who was it? Max, I think possibly, and Sacchini, why didn't he move and get rid of this sword hanging over his head? And my simple answer is because this is a philosophical story. That this is a story, this is not necessary to be taken entirely literally. Perhaps he just threatened them in real life if this story were true. Either way, he ordered it to dangle over the cervicibus, over the neck of that fortunate man, of that happy man. Notice how often the beati comes up here. Itaque nec pulcros, illos ministratores aspiciebat, nec plenum artis argentum, nec manum porrigebat in mensam. Jam ipsae defluebant coronae, denique exoravit tyrannum, ut abere liceret quod jam beatus nolet esse. And so, itaque, and so he no longer aspiciebat, he no longer looked at illos ministratores, he no longer looked at the pulchros ministratores, at his, I've said, sexy waiters. I don't think the word sexy gets used enough in Latin, so it's good that I'm trying to bring it back into the classics world. So, itaque, and so he no longer looked, he didn't look at those attractive, at those sexy slaves, waiting staff, nec, nor at the argentum, nor at the silver filled with artistry, nec, nor did he podigebat, nor did he stretch out his manum, his hand in mensam towards the table, towards his food. I love this next bit of wonderful imagery. Jam, now his garlands were drooping down, were slipping off. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that a wonderful image as he's there absolutely terrified? Denique, finally, he exoravit, he begged the tyrant, ut liceret, begging, look for a ut plus the subjunctive, it's going to be an indirect command, isn't it? Of course it is. So he begged the tyrant that he be allowed to go away, quod, because he nolet esse, because he wasn't wanting to be happy now. I think that's absolutely fantastic, that use of the beatus again, because he wasn't wanting to be happy. I suppose the idea being that actually, was he ever happy? He's certainly not happy now. The idea of the threat that looms over you means that you no longer enjoy the taste of your food or the sexiness of your slaves, if you have a threat looming over you, which Dionysius obviously felt he had. He begged the tyrant to let him go because he didn't want to be happy anymore. Satisne videto declarasse Dionysius nihil esse e beatum qui semper aliqui terror impendeat, atque ei ne integrum quidem erat, ut ad justitiam remigraret, quibus libertatem et jura rederet. Satisne, doesn't it really seem that doesn't Dionysius really seem, videor, that deponent verb again, I seem, to have proven, nihil, that nothing is happy, for that man for whom some terror or a terror aliqui of some sort is looming over. There is no happiness for the man over whom some terror is looming. Atque. Now this bit, I needed to take some time to look at. Integer means whole. And I was trying to figure out exactly what that meant. Then I realized that the integrum est means the freedom to do something. There is freedom to blah, blah, blah. Atque. And so there was ne freedom. And so there was no freedom. And in the same way, there was no freedom for him. This is now Dionysius. And for him, there was not the freedom to remigraret, to go back to justice, to rederet, to return freedom and laws, quibus, to the citizens, dative. There was no freedom to return to justice. The idea being that in the past he had done so much that it was now impossible for him to return to the happy life because of the crimes that he had committed in the past. Is enim se adolescens improvida aetate in retirat eratis eaque commiserat ut salvus esse non posset si sanos esse corpiset. For he, enemis, for he as a adolescens, as a young man, had in retirat se, had involved himself in eratis, in errors, in mistakes, with the thoughtlessness of youth, I suppose, with an improvida aetate, in a thoughtless age of his life, in a thoughtless time. So for he, as a young man in a thoughtless period of his life, had involved himself in mistakes, and had commiserat, and had done such things, ut that, this is a result clause, isn't it? And had done those things so that, with a result that he was non posset, that he was not able to be salvus, safe, si, if he coepiset, if he began to be sanus, if he began to be good. Isn't that wonderful? What a fantastic passage. I really love that in a very geeky, nerdy way, but I love this and I love the philosophy behind it, that he had become this person whereby he could no longer afford to be a good man because of the things that he'd done. It was necessary for him to continue to be a bad man in order to stay alive, and it's very Tony Soprano-esque, isn't it? In order to stay alive, it was necessary for him to be a monster, even though, as Cicero reminds us, this was actually an incredibly artistic, intelligent man who would have liked to have surrounded himself with friends and similarly intelligent, lovely wonderful people, but because of the things that he had done, he had to surround himself with killers. Let that all be a lesson, or let that rather be a lesson to all of us. Well done, everyone, and I will see you next lesson.